The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Garrett French and Megan Hannay. We're
Hello.
here to present the local engagement webinar. Now this webinar, we're both ecstatic to be presenting it today. It's a topic that we've both been studying for quite a while. At least Citation Labs has been working on it for at least 2 or 3 years now, and then Megan has been concerted on it. Megan, 6 months now, where you've really been concentrating on just local.
Since early last fall. So
Yeah.
it's been quite a ride.
So we're pumped, and this is our first co-presented webinar as well. So we're trying to make it a little more conversational, and really kind of tap into what we're both best at in our knowledge areas, right? But webinar goals. So first of all, we have what we believe to be a very unique perspective on the local web ecosystem. And we want to share that with you. Now, this is one of those things where I hope it doesn't seem dry at the outset, but I'm just going to go out there and say you probably don't know the local web. You think you do, or you think you know what the local web is, but I think you're going to be interested and surprised at how we've thought it through, how we kind of think about the web, and then almost more importantly, how we look at engaging with each one of these kind of distinct groupings of website and organization at the local level, at the hyperlocal level. The other is we want you to think more creatively at the local level, right?
That's
like at the hyperlocal. Yeah. And lastly, measuring, right? Like really measuring what local looks like, or what impact local can have. So Megan, did I leave any goal? Did I leave what else about goals today?
I think that's good. I mean, mostly just getting everyone excited and interested and to share what we've been doing and get people pumped about different forms of local engagement, like you said. So, but we have to start with the crux of the conversation: why work with the local web to begin with?
Yes. Yes. Why go local? Why are we having this webinar? Why are you attending this webinar? What are the results we're going for here? Okay. So there's quite a few. We haven't really. This is our brainstorm of kind of the impacts.
There's some things, but yeah.
Yeah, these are some of them. The types of things you can do at the kind of the hyperlocal level. Certainly, impacting or getting in front of local blog audiences would be one type of benefit. Just general branding. Especially again at that hyperlocal level. Social media, local social media shares, and again, we really are trying to be as measurable as possible in this effort. Branding, of course, is always hard to measure. One thing that you could measure for sure would be local press mentions and links. Let's see. I guess
like from local pages.
Yeah. Yes, from local news sites, links from local websites. Yeah. Actual, I guess, offline branding too. So like any kind of print publication that you've been in, real old-fashioned newspaper snippets, right? Like clippings. I mean, how many banners did you get on at local sporting events, that sort of thing? Let's see. Getting a friend. Help me continue.
Yeah, well,
have we talked it through?
Is kind of, I mean, this is the short list, but this is, I think the point is you can really get as many things as you can get on a national scale, but at a local scale. So you can get in email newsletters, you can get in hard copy newsletters. It's right. The kind of the point of it is that really it's for marketers that have goals across the spectrum. It's not just for social media people. It's not just for link builders. It's the way that we're looking at local. It's no matter what your marketing goals are, what you're trying to measure, there are ways to get that on a hyper local level, by reaching people in your target city. So.
And I think one thing that's been astounding to me, and this is getting a little bit into like the ecosystem itself, but is the sheer variety of from city to city of what is available. You're telling me today, Megan, about a scoreboard that was available for a Little League team
in San Diego.
Yeah. It wanted money for a new scoreboard, and you're going to get your name on it for 10 years. Now, is that a good fit for everybody? No, but it's awesome for the right person, right? So there's just the types of opportunities that are out there are so varied, and they vary, they vary from city to city too, depending on what kinds of interests are most popular in that city, what kind of culture is in that city.
Right.
But in a nutshell, we're doing this to increase your hyper-local brand, impact how hyper-local communities are viewing your brand, like what kinds of associations are they making, and then to, of course, to increase leads, be that through local search, be that through word of mouth, local word of mouth, or referrals from websites. So. That's really why we're doing this. That's why local.
Yeah, and I'd add to that finally, like you were saying about the scoreboard, I think because when you get hyper local, you're talking about physical, that's when you're on t-shirts, that's when you're on. So that's why there's so much variety, because when you get outside of the digital world, there's so many more places that you can be, which is kind of fun too. So yeah, I guess going into defining the local web if we want to, because that's probably necessary in order to.
And we're talking about content marketing efforts. We're talking about just, in some cases ad buying, right? Like buying ads in front of the right audience. It's so we really are, if you're a classic SEO, we're not just talking about, local links. We're talking about as the whole spectrum at that hyper local level. But okay, let's talk about what the local web is, okay? First of all, for the purposes of this webinar and for how we're approaching local, we're not talking about kind of the mass reach, the one-stop mass reach local. We're not talking about Yelp. We're not talking about the Yellow Pages. We're not talking about even mass, because there's agencies you can go to who can get you on put your advertising on every news station in the United States. We're not talking about that kind of reach or that kind of local connection with people. We're talking more about websites and organizations that exist only in that particular city, in that specific city. This is where you find a lot more true community from that city, right? From that it's the homegrown kinds of communities and websites and organizations and endeavors that are truly reaching the local market. Truly reaching, how do we measure truly reaching? I think we're talking about kind of engagement beyond just being a news station, engagement beyond just being a radio. We're talking about,
and they're also
people who are involved in lives, right?
Yeah. They're also grassroots. Like, so they were, like every city has a news station, but not every city has this particular nonprofit, or it might have this particular, homeless shelter, but, every city's homeless shelter is started different ways by different people. So it's more organic to the city as opposed to the local. Local news stations are awesome, and they are very local in their own way, but there's not one way to target all of the homeless, to donate to all the homeless shelters in the United States. So this is why you're really going city by city and seeing what's there and engaging with them.
Yep. It's something that's important also to note is just the difference from city to city. Do we have a slide on that, or should I talk?
Well, I have not a slide particularly, but it is inconsistent from city to city.
But there's a note on here. It's driven by the nature and character of a region and its residents, right? And that's so think about Austin, Texas, kind of the ideas that come to mind there, and the culture that you imagine would be there. If you're from outside the US, Austin's kind of an artsy, startup-y type culture of a city. It's kind of an exciting place. And then imagine like a Fort Lauderdale, where it's kind of more of a, I don't really know too much about Fort Lauderdale, so I hope there's nobody from there listening. But it's a bit drier when it comes to the culture. It's not thought of as kind of a hotbed for new artists or for the music or for culture. So, but the web reflects this also, right? Like the local web for that city, the websites that are built by local residents and the organizations that form in that city are different, and part of that, the city's culture is reflected in its local web and in the local websites that are specific to that city. The reason why we engage with it, in short, is to become a part of that community. We're working to join the hyperlocal community, but first you have to know it and understand who it is, where it is, what it's doing, why it's doing it, and then you start to work into a brand fit from there. Like, how do we actually work well with this organization in a way that benefits our business goals and this organization's goals.
And also, Garrett, I would say, to add on to what you're saying about Austin and Fort Lauderdale, I think that's part of why a lot of it's been difficult. It's difficult to think about local web in terms of scaling unless you're talking about, say, local news stations or things that are consistent from city to city, because so much is inconsistent. So much is just very regional or very much based on the kinds of people that live there. And so when you're thinking of even personas or your target demographic, maybe I'm sure there are plenty of companies that want customers both in Austin and Fort Lauderdale. And so from a perspective of how do we reach them locally, it can be really difficult because those people might be doing very different things in their individual cities.
Sure.
So.
The same demographic, but maybe in Fort Lauderdale, you're, I don't know, a swim, like a soccer mom in Austin might be a swim mom in Fort Lauderdale, for example. So, and you made an interesting point. You talked about the things that are consistent from city to city are where that's what has kind of already been scaled, right?
Right.
It's the things that are inconsistent from city to city that haven't been scaled or kind of reached at a mass level, but these are the very things that are intrinsic to that city and that are important and of that city, and I think it's the inconsistencies from city to city, the inconsistent types of organizations that are the most important in your local efforts. I think it's easiest to go to the news stations first, right, and think, how do we work well with local news stations? And I think we probably will be talking a little bit about that today. Mm-hmm. But it's also, again, it's like how are people actually living in this city, and how do we work with them well where they are with what they're doing there. Anyhow, let's go. Yeah. It's the inconsistencies that are very interesting, and that really necessitate. Fun. Yeah, they're fun, and it's what necessitates kind of a real careful prospecting methodology, a very careful and gradual and slow outreach methodology from city to city. There's just really different types of organizations at the hyperlocal level.
And I think that goes into the problem with local marketing as we see it, is that brands that like we said, it's harder to scale. So it's harder to find those connections with authentic local community touch points, as we call them, because you really have to do your research in each individual city. And will you talk a little bit about your idea of the promise of the internet? Because I liked that, but it's also
so the promise of the internet is a website, for example, like Yelp, right? Like Yelp is like we're going to get everywhere, and we'll you have one website you can go to, and we can reach every local place. The problem is that they don't actually reach every local place in the way that every brand should kind of be in that local place, if that makes sense. So there's still this just massive fragmentation of these inconsistent organizations at the local level, and we'll proceed. We'll give examples as we proceed. But there's just to me, the promise of the internet is this connectivity with everyone, or this, like, you can reach anyone, and they're really still, unless you're really carefully looking for it, like we'll talk about doing a bit in this webinar further on, unless you're really carefully looking in each city, there's really no way to find all of these types of groups unless you're kind of looking one by one.
Yeah.
So then there's no kind of one-stop shop for hyper-local.
Right.
Well, we're building it with ZipSprout, but there's no, like, it just doesn't exist right now. That type of mass reach to this fragmented marketplace is just, it's missing. So here's what we've seen people do to answer this problem, right? Of course, we all know these things: PPC, directory listings, obviously requesting reviews, regional media ads, so beyond like radio, print, billboards. It's from a single, from your desktop or from your phone, there's you could probably cover a pretty wide area pretty quickly, right? Like, but there's going to come a point when you've kind of saturated a market doing this, and you're leaving customers on the table, and that's because you're not reaching them again at that what we would call the hyperlocal or grassroots level of engagement. So anyhow, this is what we've seen as kind of a core response to the problem of local engagement or local reach. Okay. Do you feel like that's pretty well captured, Megan? Was there any?
Yeah, and I would just say again, it's because it's like, as far as everything's been scaled, you're only reaching people who can be reached by these scaled methods, so it will work in certain cases very well, but you're not covering an entire area. You just can't. I mean, and that's the way advertising works in general. It's just when you're trying to look hyper local, it's like trying to find these pockets where people are and saying, well, do they really care about directory listings, or do they even watch television? So
Sure.
how are they?
Well, and there's this promise of mobile as well, and people are pursuing mobile as kind of almost synonymous with local, right? And so much is happening on mobile phones, but I still feel like there's something to be said for being on that banner at a little league game. We definitely are not saying you shouldn't be doing any of these other methods of reaching local, but just that you're leaving a lot of touch points untouched, I guess. You're leaving a lot of community
point, but not super and it's not super personalized either, which is why I think our answer is to better, if you're really looking to engage with a particular community, is to jump into that local ecosystem and figure out how work with that local web.
Yeah. How do we make ourselves home in this community, in this neighborhood, in this zip code? How do we really engage with it? So that's what this webinar is about. So Megan, what's next? Demographics? Thinking about demographics?
I think that when we're talking about this, and we're jumping into examples soon, but when we're talking about trying to find where your potential customers are in a local level, it's kind of thinking about, okay, where are they when they're not online? Because if you're talking about people who are surfing the web all the time, then you can you can target social media ads to certain locations, you can do PPC. There's a lot of ways. So there's a lot of ways to reach people if they're at their computer or if they're watching television, but we're talking about reaching people in the real world. Where do these people go on the weekend? So we do think a lot about personas when we think about targeting, particular customers, and thinking about where your potential customers in city X, what are they doing besides surfing the internet, besides making $80,000 a year or whatever.
What are they doing when they're not being your customers?
Right, exactly.
So when they're not lined up with your exact demographics, what are they out doing? And that's going to differ from city to city, and this is why when they have their free time. What do your personas, what do your best customers in target location do on the weekends? I think that's an important question to be asking yourself.
Definitely. So we're going to jump into examples.
Yeah. Let's show what we're talking about.
This is the local web. Yeah, so we've curated about I think around 8 or 10 examples of exactly the kind of people that you can reach when you go hyper-local, and in all varieties as well. So if you read our recent blog post about advertising or sponsorship or all kinds of opportunities with hyperlocal, we listed a lot of different types or a lot of different tactics. So we're going to be going through different examples of exactly what opportunities exist in all of these different tactics. So this first one we have is an East Los Angeles music magazine, which actually does advertising, which is much more familiar for a lot of people, but it's you have to contact them directly. There's no way to advertise with them.
So what was astounding to me about this specific example, and Megan has spent some time in California living there. I've only visited a few times, but it's that this is for East Los Angeles. It's not just Los Angeles. It's not covering all of Los Angeles. It's just covering East Los Angeles. I know Los Angeles is huge, but this is the, when we start talking about the local web, when it is genuinely local, it's going to have some of that flavor of the location, and a lot of that will come out in the name, and it will come out. Well, you think about it. Think about where you live now. You live in. If you were telling Garrett where you lived, you would say you live in XYZ city. Hey, Garrett would say, where are you from? I'm from Los Angeles. Now, if you're telling somebody in Los Angeles where you're from, or you're telling somebody in your own city where you're from, you can be more specific. It's because each neighborhood has a flavor, or each zip code has a tone or has a feel, and you usually want to specify. Of course, we're not usually specifying by zip code, but we would talk about the neighborhood we're from, and it is distinctive, and it is it distinguishes kind of to some extent who you are, based on where you live in the city. It's saying something about you in some cases. So there's something, and this is in a lot of cases, especially if you're not a local to where you're trying to do local work, which is often the case for us with ZipSprout. We have to kind of learn this slowly. We don't know beforehand what neighborhoods are the artsy neighborhoods, which neighborhoods are the ones with all the restaurants in them, or there's just a lot that we as marketers from afar don't know. But this is what you encounter time and again at the local level, and you're encountering a real website when you're seeing neighborhood nicknames in the domain name, or like specific areas within a city in the domain name, like this one, East Los Angeles Music Magazine. It's just or I guess that's not even the domain, that's the
how they talk about
not in the domain name, but yeah, that's what they call themselves.
And I would also just add on to that. So like knowing Los Angeles, like East Los Angeles is definitely a bit more of the like hip, cool, hipster area. So I think as we were talking about thinking about your personas, where are they on the weekends, knowing or at least knowing who these personas are, and then looking at a city from that perspective, you might find that there are definitely neighborhoods in which your target customers live more. If you're looking for the techie people, or if you're looking for the hipster people, or if you're looking for the young families, like what you're looking within a city, you might try to find opportunities that are very specific to certain neighborhoods, because that's where in the real world your customers actually are.
Quickly, one way to look for these types of opportunities would be to search for Los Angeles and then in title advertise with us. Kind of all in quotes, advertise with us. That's a prospecting tip for finding those types of opportunities.
And that's, I think, exactly what I did to find that opportunity, just the in title. So, and it worked. So there we go. This next one is a nonprofit in Indianapolis that helps people find housing. And this opportunity is much more along the lines of a sponsorship. So you can see that they have on their website listed a few people. One is a beer company and one is a marketing company that are They're big sponsors, and they have them listed on their website, and they probably do a lot more as well with them. With their big sponsors, a lot of times they will mention them at a lot of different events. They'll have signage, they'll talk about them in their email newsletter. So this is just another way to reach people, like in Indianapolis, but in a way that's not direct advertising. I mean, it is direct advertising, but it's just in a way of, like, aligning your company mission of helping people, and then also getting out there. Like, they even have subscribed to our e-newsletter at the top, so potentially getting out there in front of potential customers in an interesting way.
And other local like-minded businesses. So, not everyone's going to be able to work with the Three Wise Men Brewing Company, but if that sponsor could be a customer of yours, or would make sense as a customer of yours, then that is one kind of, that's a nice little calling card, like, hey, we're both sponsoring the same organization. We're both sponsoring the same. So there's some B2B kind of, partnering, allegiance, demonstration benefits that can come from this as well. I wouldn't say that's why you would necessarily do this, but the other part is looking at if your missions are aligned, with local nonprofits, then it absolutely makes sense to sponsor and then do a press release, or ask the organization itself at what how can we, what would constitute a press release worthy level of sponsorship here, so we can push this involvement a little bit further and make some news out of our involvement with you. And the other is reaching, as Megan said, reaching the other people who sponsor them. Really is kind of, I don't know that the people they're helping would necessarily be customers for most organizations, or many organizations or businesses, but the other people who are in their sponsor community are the ones. Yeah, the volunteers, sure, would make a lot of sense. And then, of course, just the good old feeling of goodwill and giving to the community, and kind of demonstrating to the community that you give to the community can have benefit as well.
And I would also say, like, as you can see, they have events. They have a tab for events, and a lot of local nonprofits we've worked with have events. So even if people aren't directly sponsoring, they might not even, local people in Indianapolis might not even really know a lot about this organization, but they might attend. Nonprofits are getting very creative and doing some really cool, I mean, there's the 5Ks that there are in almost every city, almost every weekend now, but there's a lot of different interesting events that nonprofits are starting to do. And so you might have someone who's like, oh, I'm just going to this, little festival thing, having, not realizing that it's sponsored by it's created by a nonprofit, and your sponsorship of that event in tandem with that nonprofit would be another way to reach that person.
And in a very real way, especially when you're sponsoring events, you are helping create culture in that city. Yeah. You're kind of driving or enabling events to happen, for culture to form when people meet on the street, and they're eating hot dogs and walking around, and
Three Wise Men beer.
Exactly. So you're making things happen, and that's a good place to be at the local level, Yeah. And it is a lot offline, and this is why we I don't know if we have a section, and I know we had one in the article. I don't know if it's in the webinar, but just on hybrid, like online, offline stuff, that where you're kind of looking in both places. But we definitely suggest you work to be in both places, and this is going to be to our SEOs listening. This is going to be like, why, because you're probably measured on how many leads are you sending to the site based on organic search, but the answer is, talk to your branding department. This is a big deal. It's important to be working at that local level, and I wouldn't say, like, obviously SEO agnostic, but definitely let's realize that there's more than just SEO that you can benefit when you're working at the local level.
Yeah. So here's another example, and this is more of an event. And actually, this one I put some of the sponsorship levels along. I copied and pasted that just to show as an example. So it's a farmer's market that happens in Vermont for about 6 months, or fewer than 6 months actually, every year. But I just loved looking at these sponsorship lists. I mean, for $1,000, you get, your name on canvas bags, you get a link to your website, you get a table space and this, again, like, even if you are nowhere near Vermont and you're like, what am I going to do with a table space? There are ways to get creative. If you talk to the people that are behind the Burlington Farmers Market, they can probably find ways to donate that space and then, still include your branding on it. So there are always ways to use a lot of opportunities to your advantage. And really with local, you're seeing for not super large amounts of money, ways to reach people in interesting ways. Doing
I want to talk about the booth space idea.
Mm-hmm.
So when there can be some wonderful benefits to that booth space if you have people in that area. We've seen kind of an unexpected benefit when an SEO contact at a client's company mentioned to the brand team that there was some opportunity for some of their members or regional employees to attend an event. It really made the folks at the local level really excited, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because they felt like they were being they got free tickets to some events, some local events, and not only that, they got to shake hands, they got to be there at the event and represent the company and maybe get some more business for themselves. So if you're doing local engagement at the enterprise level, that's something to be looking for, is what types of events should our people be at. I think that's, again, just a dramatically, profoundly underutilized, underinvestigated, underappreciated benefit to local engagement, is just having a person at an event representing your brand, representing your company. So anyhow, that booth space could be an awesome opportunity for the right company, the right brand to reach that market and actually talk to some of the people at the farmers market. And certainly to determine whether it's worth going back there again, right? Should we do the bigger sponsorship? Did we get any leads from this? Were there any kind of warm leads that came through from actually being at this farmers market? So again, it's not going to be a fit for everybody. But we just want to show you kind of the range of opportunity. Yeah.
And I would also say on top of that, I mean, in addition to what you're saying about local employees, if you're a business that does have, many different branches, but even if you're, like, for example, a sharing economy business that, has not necessarily local employees, but local users who are interested in promoting themselves, like companies like Uber, companies that, they have a lot of people at the local, in a lot of different cities that might be, super users that might be interested in going out and doing some self-promotion. This could be a great way. And maybe not necessarily the farmers market, but if you had tickets to a particular event, like a party or, a gala that you had sponsored, to say, hey, you're a super user of our company. Thank you so much. We would love for you to go to this event for free. If you want to spread some goodwill and tell people that you're there and because of us, that would be great. And just, that person's going to have a good time. They're going to say great things about your company, and you're still getting all the other benefits of sponsorship without having to fly someone to a location that you're not in. And I would also say on top of that, this is something that we're doing with a client and with an organization in San Diego. They're sponsoring an evening dinner that's to raise money for the Susan G. Komen Foundation, and they can't make it to the dinner, so they're donating their table to local breast cancer survivors, which is a really interesting story. Like, it just makes a good story. So now I'm working with them to see if we can write about it on our blog and see other ways that we can tell the story of there's just really interesting ways to work with people, even if you're not able to go visit directly. So I guess is the point. So again, getting creative is fun.
Who's next? Who's our next example?
So we have a neighborhood association, just like Garrett's. That's
I
there.
love
Go
neighborhood
for it.
associations.
Yeah.
Okay, let me talk a little bit about why I'm excited about them. Like they're tricky and difficult to work with because and I think I always think of my father who was on a neighborhood association and didn't he ran the website and he's not a webmaster and so I just always imagine that we're emailing him when we email a neighborhood association. Like, how do we kind of talk to this guy? So there's, things have to pass through boards, and they're going to bring up your email at the next meeting, and they're going to have to talk it through, and nothing's going to happen quickly. But okay, what is lovely and just absolutely wonderful about a neighborhood association is that first of all, you don't get more local or hyper local than a neighborhood association. One, two, this is a way to engage with kind of the managers or the government. It's not really government, but kind of it's pseudo government. At the pseudo government level, and kind of learn what would be a meaningful way for us to kind of engage with this neighborhood. Do you have any neighborhood cleanups coming up? Can we get our logo on a neighborhood cleanup shirt that you guys are doing? What are you guys trying to accomplish? How can we help you accomplish this? And again, like if you look at across neighborhood association websites, the majority look like they were made in 1998, 2005.
This is one of the nicer ones here.
But they're just wonderful. They're just absolutely wonderful, real websites with real people behind them who really care about their local area. And if you're demonstrating to them that you care also, and you're finding ways to contribute to their community, I'll tell you now, not a whole lot of people are really concertedly doing that. And it's just because it's difficult. It's hard to figure out how do we work well with this neighborhood association. They're not as difficult to work with as homeowner associations, but they're definitely, it's hard to get them on the phone. But when you do, and when you're able to work well with them, you are connecting with a real neighborhood. They have newsletters, they have festivals, they run events, contests, or gatherings. I know my parents always did they organized a wine tasting event at the local park, and so there's just these events that go on that might not even be advertised on the website. Like, these guys don't know how to do it. They, in some cases, not all cases, not just my dad doesn't run all the neighborhood associations, but they just don't necessarily know how to demonstrate that they have these kinds of opportunities. So in a lot of cases, you just have to reach out and see what they're doing and if there's any way to work with them. But anyhow, I love neighborhood associations. I think they're just a wonderful, wonderful kind of representation of what the local web looks like and why it's there, and also why it's so fragmented. It would not make sense for I guess there are kind of some, there's one or two mass publishers of neighborhood association websites, so some people have kind of tried to be a one-stop shop for neighborhood associations, but anyhow, I think it's much more effective to kind of go at the hyper-local level, one by one, and work with these individuals. The other thing that's so interesting is you get neighborhood names this way, and if you can actually use the neighborhood name, it's more meaningful than just saying the city name. It shows me that you really actually know my location, or you care about my area, as opposed to just my whole city. We live in Louisville. We're in the Highlands in Louisville, and if you say, "Hey, I care about Louisville," that doesn't mean much to me. If you say, "Hey, I care about the Highlands," that means a lot more to me personally. And I think that's what. When you're seeing that specific location in your engagement with folks, I think that just means a lot. But okay, Megan, what did I leave out about
neighborhood associations? I think, and plus now we're going on to bloggers, which is something that I love to talk about. Yeah, this is a little bit of a shift, although this is for a lot of you listening. Blogger engagement is not something new, but local blogger engagement is a really interesting kind of tactic that we're experimenting with and we're starting with. So trying to find local influencers, be they bloggers, maybe just people that are, popular on social media in an area, to, advocate for your product or for your service and reaching out in that way. So this, again, with all of these, it's a little bit more intensive to prospect for them, because you're looking for not only someone who aligns with your brand, but also someone who's in a very particular city. But when you find them, and your list might end up being a lot shorter than a lot of you are used to for blogger outreach, just because once you doing all that narrowing down, there may only be 10, 15, 20 people. But because you're approaching them with such a hyper local request, and such a, I'm interested because you live in Eugene, Oregon, and we're doing this in Eugene, Oregon, and we'd love to send you to, give you a free something, or I'd love to ask you to review something. There's pretty decent response rate, because you're not just mass emailing people, you're actually highly targeting these men and women bloggers. So this is just an example of a woman that lives in Eugene that, if I had a product that aligned with fashion or lifestyle, and really was trying to, like, maybe like a version of Etsy, or like a fashion website that was really trying to get more attention in the Oregon area, she's someone I could reach out to and really do a highly specified engagement with. So,
and one tricky thing that Megan has figured out for us on local blogger prospecting, I was too literal for a long time about how are we finding local bloggers, and just looking in title or in URL for city names. And again, what we run into, we had a note from a listener about San Francisco, and I think about kind of the neighborhood fragmentation of San Francisco.
oh
But
man,
if we looked
yeah,
for San
it's a great
Francisco
city.
bloggers, like that, we would find a few. But if we knew neighborhood names,
The
well,
mission,
they would. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Folks wouldn't, but people aren't necessarily putting even the name of their city in their blog or
mm-hmm.
in any of their blog posts. Megan learned for us that it's on the About Us page or About Me page
Yeah.
of the blog. And so we've been looking with advanced operators, looking at the About Me, in URL blog or in title blog, and then in quotes the name of the city, and then for especially for a city like San Francisco, you could spend months parsing through a city and just learning its neighborhoods. Just especially a big city like San Francisco, like Los Angeles, there's just going to be, if you're an outsider, it's going to take a long time to really understand what it means to be from a specific neighborhood, and even nicknames for that neighborhood that are native to the city that you don't know if you're not. Anyhow, it's a really fascinating. The names that locations have is just a fascinating topic. But again, Megan's discovery was for prospecting for local blogs was not to look in title or on page, or I'm sorry, in title or in the URL, but rather on the page of the About Me or About Us of a blog is a much stronger way to find that. So,
Yeah, and I think,
again,
both
good
can
job.
work, but yeah, I think a lot of times right on the about page is where someone will say, like, I'm proud to be from Dallas, just that kind of thing. So if you are looking for very specific features about a particular blogger, searching about me pages, or about, they usually should be about me, because then if you get into just about, then it's like so many pages have the word about on them. But if you're looking for about me pages on blogs, that's really where you're going to find that highly specific information about them. And then I would just say, as an extra bonus prospecting, just do like minus about.me, because if you're looking for about me, like, you're going to get so many pages that just are from the website about.me, which is not necessarily what you want. So our next potential opportunity is a 5K, which, as I mentioned before, if in the US at least, it seems like there's a 5K in every city every single weekend. There are tons of 5Ks going on, but they're great opportunities, 5Ks, and just other local events, like Garrett was saying, ways to sponsor, like the fun things that are going on in a community already, are just great ways to really get in with people where they are. So, yeah.
Darren Shaw, I want to talk about Darren Shaw's example, 5K example, real quick from White Spark. So he loves, this is, I think, one of the most beautiful kind of methods for local, especially 5K sponsorship, or just where everything makes sense. But he talks about a chiropractor who was a runner himself, and so he sponsored a lot of local 5K, 10K marathons, etc. And he went to them. He actually ran in them, and from that, not only was he a sponsor, but he was there, and he got business from being there.
Right.
And what a smart place to be, advertising that you're a chiropractor, at a run where people's
Right.
backs are aching from having just run for, 10 kilometers or however many kilometers a marathon is. And so they're just exhausted and their backs are hurting, and it's just a great time to be talking to them about what you do. And then added to that, he was a sponsor as well, so he was demonstrating that these runners, that the reason why they were running was also important to him. And I think that's a really powerful way to be in front of just the exact right audience. Obviously, this isn't that doesn't make sense for everyone, but go find your 5K. There's going to be it will exist for you in your area. What like some kind of opportunity is going to just make absolute sense, and there will be more than one of them in your area probably. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah. So then we have links and resource pages that are local, which is another one of Garrett's favorite things to talk about. So I'll hand that one over to you as well.
Yes, links and resource pages. This is our, at Citation Labs, what we've really specialized in over the last 5 years or so, like really understanding links and resource pages and what gets folks to link. What is tricky at the local level is that there is a condition we call inch deep, mile wide. Just the topics are so varied. Topically, we're across the board, so you really, again, have to kind of go page by page and ask yourself what would really make sense. But there are local links and resource pages in every city, in every locale in the U.S. It's just that there might be 5 who are potential link opportunities for a specific resource you've created instead of 500. So if you're able to be local agnostic, or you just don't care about the location of the linking domain, then you write about just about any topic, and there will be a large number of links pages that you could pitch it to. But if it's local, you're not going to encounter that wealth of opportunity, and you've really got to kind of plan accordingly and don't plan to get all your links from links and resource pages at the local level. They're just about so many different things. And again, there's going to be regional variations. The amount of links pages will vary from city to city. Of course, the topics will vary from city to city. We've been studying like water-related issues at the city level, and it's just amazing. Like, of course, like cities where there are droughts, there's so many pages about water conservation. In cities where there are large bodies of water, they are talking about water conservation also, but more about preserving what already exists and keeping it clean as opposed to using less water, right? So there's just every city kind of has a different take even on water, and like the significance of water from city to city is going to be different. There's just really different types of links pages in every city. The disasters that face different cities vary. Obviously, you don't get many hurricanes in Kansas. Just not doesn't happen there. So there's just widely varied types of links pages from location to location. Now, this might, you might be saying, oh, that's obvious, but if you're really going to concertedly build links from links and resource pages in a city, you have to know, front and back why people link in the city and what they're linking to, and that takes some time and some research. But certainly, your core in URL links or in title links would be a great place to start. Plus the city name. Just to do a survey for yourself, what's out there. I would also suggest in title city name as well, just to kind of plus links pages, just to see what types of stuff is out there.
And I would just say, on to adding on to that, just from a bigger picture perspective, we talked just a few minutes ago about reaching out to local bloggers, and now we're talking about resource pages. And I would say one of the biggest differences, obviously from a branding perspective, is that the kind of people that you're reaching within a city can be very different depending on who you're reaching out to. So the resource pages, these are people who are information seekers, as we call them. They just they're looking for maybe I'm new to this city and I don't know how to conserve water. I don't know how things are with water. Whereas people that are paying attention to local bloggers are more people that maybe are interested in the fun events that are going on, or the nightlife, or maybe city politics for certain types of bloggers. But it really is much more about, I would say, even like information and facts versus just opinion and events and entertainment. Yeah. So it's thinking about that too, and what you're looking, the kind of people that you're looking to reach out to, keeping that in mind, I guess. So here's another interesting event that I love is a chalk festival in Florida. And again, there are sponsors. Their sponsors are on their website. Their sponsors are involved with the event. But just what a cool thing. Like, I love these.
Chalk.
It's the kind of things where, like, if you walk on them, it looks like you're standing over, like that kid in the library. It's like it's the 3D. Like, somehow these people are amazing with chalk, and they can do 3D looking. And it's just like an interesting, festivals is definitely something that we look for, and we try to find sponsorships for as much as possible, because again, they're ways into the lifeblood of a city.
Yes. This, not every city has a chalk festival. Like, this is probably something that the residents are excited about here. I would be if we had a chalk festival in Louisville. I think that'd be pretty cool. So it's a way to intersect with what is important and valued in that city, in that specific city. So again, be open when you start prospecting, when you're looking for opportunities. Be open and expectant of a wide variety of possibility, and then don't expect anything either. Be open. Recognize that there will be regional variances that you couldn't have ever dreamed of.
Yeah, but at the same time, there will be just like fun, interesting opportunities. I mean, like, just looking at their sponsors, they have everything from the local Sharky's on the pier, which I assume is just a local restaurant, to the Ramada, which is a national chain. Yeah. So there really are opportunities for all kinds of businesses to engage with these kinds of events, which is exactly what we're looking for. So, and finally, press, journalists. So reaching out to local press. And I actually have two examples, both from Phoenix, Arizona, the Republic, which is their local newspaper, and both examples of ways that larger businesses got a mention in the Republic. So the first one is Uber, which is, most people probably know what Uber is. It's just a great example of a company that is doing some local engagement. They're like A+ on local engagement, but they also have a lot of funding. They're a gigantic company, and they have the resources to send, I believe, with every new city that they embark in, they have at least a couple of people on the ground in that city full time to do local marketing in that city. So this is a company with a lot of resources at their disposal, and they were able to do a campaign very specific to Phoenix. They did the Puppy Bowl, which I think they did in different cities around the country, but then also the Phoenix Open, which is a golf tournament taking place in Phoenix. They did a promotion around that as well. So they were looking for, hey, what's going on in the city? How can we do a promotion with our company that very much targets the city? And they gave away tickets, having to do, So I think that's a great way that they were able to make sure, and I mean, they got in the newspaper because of it. So it's a way that they worked with the city and what was going on in the city already. And even if your company maybe doesn't have the size and scope of Uber, this is another example I found from the same newspaper. And I just thought it was neat because it's called Popnology. It's a little pop-up science museum but major sponsor is a company called Local Motors, which is a company that's trying to make the next 3D printed car, which that's awesome in and of itself. But they have a quote from the sponsor, Jay Rogers, the CEO of Local Motors, and he just says kind of like, I just thought this was awesome, so I decided to sponsor it. It's like, and he got in the press because he was working with this company, and they were it made sense for his company to work with this pop-up science exhibit. But again, it's just a way that he, and he was from the city, so he probably had more local connections, but just finding a way that his company brand was able to mix in with a need locally, and then, that became a story, which I think is pretty neat. So, Garrett,
Yeah,
do
I
you
like
have
this
any?
one a lot. No, this is a fantastic example, really interesting, um, and it's another reason why folks, when you are sponsoring something at the local level, you're asking, hey, are you guys talking with the press? Do you need any quotes from your sponsors to tell the local press? Anything we can speak to for you? I think that's a really useful kind of question to be asking, because the organizations you're sponsoring themselves will have connections that you don't. And so that's
Yeah.
part of what you're trying to leverage here, part of what you're trying to get value from. So yeah, I think this is a brilliant example, and I, I, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of gone through different examples of what is possible, here's just some thoughts based on our experience of what we've already done, and just thinking ahead to different types of campaigns that you might like to do. So if you are working with the local web, there are some major differences between national branded marketing that to be prepared to take on. And the first one is get ready for some phone calls, because and this is something that we've learned doing ZipSprout, is that the more local you're getting, the more personal just every connection is going to be, because it's not that scalable. Just give us money and we'll shoot it out to exactly who you need. It is really connecting with a city, kind of like we've been saying all along. So this is something that, really figuring out your brand, your mission, getting on the phone with people, listening to them. And a lot of times the cool thing about taking phone calls is that actually, working with a lot of different organizations, you can find ways to work together that maybe there's not always like a pre-package, like, oh, just sign up, on line 10 for items XYZ. It really is working with companies and figuring out, or organizations working with companies and figuring out what makes the most sense for both of you, which it just makes the entire process a lot more grassroots, and a lot probably makes more sense for your company. Garrett, did you have anything to add on to that, or?
Um, the I think for me, what was as ZipSprout has grown, what's been sort of astounding is the desire that folks have to get on the phone with us and
Mm-hmm.
like actually talk and say who they are. They want an ear. They also want to make sure that you're right for them. There's a lot of
Yeah.
qualifying that's going on at the local level, and you're going to be the one who's being qualified. It's funny, it's not as much just a buyer's market, like where you go out and, pick up a tomato off the shelf and pay for it. It's like that tomato is going to be making sure you're the right person for it, and I think that's wonderful, and it's sort of a kind of makes makes the local web so valuable, and it's why it isn't quite as scalable the way that TV stations, they might ask if an advertiser is right for them, but there's at a certain level they'll take anybody. And we've definitely seen that whether it's a local blogger or any kind of local organization or a local event, they don't simply take anybody. They want to know who you are and how you're going to be contributing to them beyond money, right? So this really is about engaging and engagement, and they're really looking for an investment, not just of the money, but of your attention and time, perhaps of how will you be announcing that you're sponsoring us? You know, how will you be able to send people to the event? You know, they want to meet you. They'll want to get to know you. So be prepared for that. And I think that's been a really important kind of lesson that we've learned along the way.
Yeah, and this definitely isn't meant to scare, be like, oh my God, there goes your life, but it's really, I think, beneficial for both parties when you're interested in this type of engagement to kind of think of it as a completely separate thing from a lot of the marketing that you're used to, because it is just so personalized and so one-on-one. But I really think that if done in the right way, it can be very beneficial for a brand. It can be ways to achieve goals like we listed at the beginning, and we're going to kind of go through these at the end as well. Different can achieve the marketing goals that you're looking to achieve, but in ways that are really working for you with the customers that you're looking for, in a way that maybe there aren't as many other people on the ground there, because it is so highly personalized. You're really not fighting against as much noise as you would be in other marketing areas, which is cool and interesting as well. And I think this is kind of goes along with what we're saying, but thinking about local opportunities as decommoditized engagements, that you're as you're stepping in, you're almost trying to become a good community member and making sure to put your brand's best foot forward. So this is a little bit less like engaging with a salesperson where you can just leave the table at any point and kind of ghost on someone and you're not interested anymore. When you're dealing with people and their passions, things do feel a little bit more personal, and just to remember that, you are speaking to them as your brand. So if you come to them as, brand XYZ and you engage and then suddenly you kind of disappear, that local person, in the community that you're trying to reach in a positive way is now going to have a negative experience with your brand. And this person is a local influencer. They're in charge of this organization. So that's not that you have to engage with every single person you talk to, but just to make sure that you're leaving experiences in a positive way, and that you're interacting positively with people, because it is a lot more personal than just calling up an agency or a salesperson who's, much more business aligned and things really aren't as personal. So it's a good thing to keep in mind.
I think this is important. Again, this is one of those, like, you wouldn't know until you did it. But, working at the scale we've worked at, definitely, you can't just walk out of the store.
Yeah, the tomato will be sad.
Right.
So again, just going back over some of the tactics that we mentioned with the examples earlier, and kind of matching them to some of the the benefits that you can receive from some of these different engagements. So, again, like working with local bloggers, and I won't read all of this word for word, but we'll have this webinar online and we can put the slides online. And actually all of this is listed in the article that we put up on citationlabs.com/blog. It's the top article, the ultimate guide to local web engagement. But just how, really based on the types of results you're looking for, how different tactics interact with those. So, based on if you're looking for social media attention, based on if you're looking for press attention, if you're looking for links, if you're looking just for local branding. And you'll see this is ZipSprout, the company that we're launching to help other companies do this. Finding target demographics in a particular region, as in, looking for those local 5Ks, those local organizations. That's really where you can hit so many different marketing goals, because really, it's as broad and as wide as you can think. Everything from getting on, the local, the scoreboard at the baseball team to just, getting in newspaper stories, to just everything really, because you're working on a highly local level. So the opportunities are almost endless.
And they're endless, and you don't know what they are until you start to look. So I would implore everyone on the webinar listening to this, anybody who's read the article, just go and see what's out there. Type in the city name, entitle sponsors, entitle our sponsors. Who's out there? What is going on in this location? And then if you really want to, pick 3 or 4 cities around the United States in very different places. Pick, a city in California, a city in Texas, a city in Alabama, a city in New Hampshire, and then do the same thing. Entitle our sponsors and just see what the variety of different types of opportunities, what they look like from city to city. And it's very, very different. It's very difficult to kind of sew together and this is why it's so the market is so fragmented. I think to some large extent, just there's so much variety there. But it's just I don't know if it's like the sociologist in me, but it's just absolutely astounding and fascinating to look at. But so the tactics, you already know the tactics, I would say. I would humbly submit to our listening audience, to our reading audience, you kind of get them already. You've been studying. If you've done any link building, you know how to prospect and send emails. If you've done PR, you know how to kind of figure out a story, and align all the stakeholders and try to get something pushed through. There's not a lot tactically that's super new or super different. It's just that you're, really what you're trying to do is be a stronger participant in that local community, and kind of. So one thing I would suggest is to really brainstorm up front, like what kinds of offers you're prepared to make, like how much time can you give at the local level for events, like what really makes sense, how many, ask your employees locally, how many are willing to go to like events if we got tickets, who could go, who actually has time. Do an assessment of your local resources that are not just cash resources. How can you participate locally? What could you do? Who could do what? It doesn't have to just be you. If the marketing, if you're in the marketing role, or if you're the owner, it doesn't have to just be you. But think about what you could do, and then kind of, to some extent, you could work from there. Also, thinking about your demographic. Where, again, as Megan said earlier, what are they doing on the weekends? I think is such an important question at the local level. And then we also like to think about asking some of your best local customers or best customers in city X, like ask just them what they're doing on the weekends and who are they donating to, what kinds of organizations or missions are personally important to them, and I think that's going to lead you in some solid directions as well. But let Megan bring me back.
Sure, yeah, no, that was all great, and I think those are some great ways to kind of work backwards and find where you can find more people like your best customers. So we wanted to wrap it up just with some ways to measure this type of local engagement, because, we can talk about how much fun it is all we want, but, many people are focused on the bottom line, which is something we should all be focused on. So, beyond mission-based marketing, which can make you feel good and do some great things for branding, if you are looking for ways to, see how local engagement can actually affect metrics or create metrics around it. They're, looking for everything from local SEO lift, if you're doing social media engagement, measuring followers or mentions in a particular region, talking to new customers in an area and see how they heard about you, to see, what sorts of branding are working, visiting, see which visits, how many visits are coming to local pages. If you have a website that has local landing pages, see if there's a lift in that and where those are coming from. And then, just measuring mentions, like you would do it in any sort of PR campaign. So these are ways, and there are definitely more ways, but we just wanted to leave the conversation with, this isn't just about, as crunchy as it sounds in some ways, there are still some really, business ways to underline campaigns with actual metrics.
If we got a interesting question that I'd love to address, Megan. Is this a good time?
This is a great time.
Okay. So I'm going to read it. It's a really interesting question. I think I know how I would respond. I'm going to go ahead and kind of answer first after I read it, and then Megan, I'd like you to give your perspective as well. But so the question is if building a national brand, but don't have the budget to compete on a national level against the established national brands, should you still focus your budget on local markets and scale as you grow over time, or should you focus on national opportunities?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, obviously I'm biased, right? Like, I'm going to want to spend, I like to make lots of little small bets and learn from those investments, bets/investments. So I would lean towards picking a market that's important, like one city that's important, and starting there and just kind of learning what seems to work. Because I would almost guarantee that there's going to be something at the hyperlocal level that will exist across multiple cities. And I know part of this whole webinar was what is in one city isn't going to be in another, but you're always looking for those things that are, like if the Opera House, for example, turns out to be where your market is. I don't know what they're selling or who their demo is, but like if the Opera House is, like most cities have an Opera House, and it's possible that your big brand competitors are not at the Opera Houses. The 5Ks are another good example. They're completely fragmented. So what you're doing then is you're saying, all right, the big brands have locked up the national stuff, like I'm guessing national engagement with nonprofits or festivals or what have you. But let's look locally at, are there similar types of events or organizations at the hyperlocal level? One, you answer that question. If not, where else is the demographic at the hyperlocal level? I almost guarantee you your big brand competitors are not thinking that way. They're not, because it's a pain. It's tough to go and work at the, at this granular level, opportunity by opportunity. But that's, you put in that work and you're going to get to that same scale that they're getting. The work is more fragmented, right? You have to establish many more relationships, but they're not. That's also that's also what kind of creates a bit of defensibility to your position there. Then you can also further learn what actually works. Is there, for example, is the bowling league especially great for you? Well, probably the local bowling league, probably your competitors are not sponsoring bowling leagues across the United States. So boom, you go do that. You can then prospect effectively across the US for a specific type of opportunity that is productive and effective for you at the local level. So that's how I would do it. I think that's an exciting position to be in, is sort of beginning to figure out what could work and how do we outflank an established national brand and become a national brand ourselves. That's an exciting place to be. I would definitely pick a city or 3 or 5 and kind of learn what seems to work especially well, and then scale what works well across the United States.
And I would also just add on to that, I come from the startup world a bit, and I think that's, depending on what the business is, which I have no idea, but I think a lot of startups, whether they're doing, this kind of local engagement or not, starting with even if you have the capacity technically to work across the country or across the world, starting with a few key cities just makes sense when you're really trying to build, a market for your service or for your product, because just, being like, yeah, we're nationwide right now. It can be difficult. But if you start with smaller community that makes sense. A lot of the startups obviously do start in San Francisco. San Francisco gets everything first because it's all the startups. But, figuring out what cities maybe already encompass people that you think would be your ideal customer, and working in those cities, like Garrett was saying, I think that can help even, just make a really big project of getting the entire country to know about you a little bit more manageable by just getting strong in a few cities, letting word spread on its own, and then increasing to other cities.
It's an exciting place to be.
It is.
Folks, we're on fire right now. Ask us some more questions. We just want to.
That's actually more questions. You can email us, or if you have them, there's a question box right now. So
this question box is so daggone small. There might have been more. I didn't know. Oh, interesting. They were great. Some people have been I'm sorry, guys. I'm not good at webinars. There's questions all through here, and I don't know that I'm scrolling through them. Anybody have any other questions now that I kind of have a better idea of what I'm doing? Um, Interesting comment. We had someone say that Yelp, they agreed with our comment about Yelp. They're in a 2 Walmart, 5 McDonald's town, so no one's on
Wow.
Yelp. That's really interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. Like the local folks aren't even looking at Yelp. I
Yeah.
just hadn't even. This is where we don't. We are starting to learn local, but I would humbly submit to our listeners, no one really knows local, right? Like it just hasn't, like especially like the hyper local or the true local, you know, fairly meaningless, but as terms, but just there's no one-size-fits-all solution. In a lot of cases, you have to get out there and do the work of the prospecting and the outreach and learning about that community, about what is important to them before you learn how to engage with that local market. So thank you for that comment. I can't see your name because I don't know how to webinar. I think that's all. I think that's all the questions. And um, someone responded that oh my gosh, there's questions pouring in. Thanks for the webinar. I live at the base of the Appalachian Trail. We're a 1 Walmart town. That's fascinating. Carrie, I don't know, I don't have a response or a thought beyond that, but how to best target 3 or 4 cities when we have only bricks and mortar office in one city? Oh, that's interesting. We actually, that's a
what we
fairly
do. Yeah.
common
Yeah.
condition, where you're kind of trying to lead gen for one place, but you want customers from other places.
Especially online businesses. That's a lot of, for ZipSpread, that's been a lot of our initial clients, our businesses that, are
They're trying
online,
to
so they're
build
not.
local brand. Yeah, they're online, essentially online only, either doing lead gen or service lead gen
Sharing
for
economy, I
local
think, is another big
contractors,
one.
sharing
Yeah.
economy stuff. So yeah, that's I would say it's a natural fit. I don't know if how else I could
Well, I would say
answer
that
that, but
that's kind of
if
what we've
there's a
been
further
talking
question
to
is,
this
yeah,
entire time,
yeah,
actually, is, and I apologize if I should break that out a bit better, but yeah, we're definitely not just
Oh, I
talking
guess the question is how
about,
to best target those 3 or 4 cities.
okay.
So it would be just to do your prospecting in those cities, look for the opportunities that exist, and then kind of, I guess, think through demographically who's reaching the right folks there at the local level. Is a very interesting question, but how to best target, you have to know your target before you start your prospecting. That's how you best target. So it's looking at who your great customers locally. Again, I would even ask your favorite customers, have a conversation with 4 or 5 of them the next time you're talking. Just we're trying to do this. We're trying to find some great places to sponsor or great places to get in front of more great folks like you. How should we do it? Where do you think we should go? And maybe they're even local schools all the time are doing fundraisers and events and that sort of thing, and some of those places could be a great place to get in front of folks. Who knows? A lot of times. Let's see,
I would
virtual
also
offices.
I would also just add, for the people who are saying they're in 1 or 2 Walmart towns, like that is so interesting, because I think that's kind of what we meant by, not only is the Yelp not entirely local, but that's why it's so important. Like, we kind of have this working theory that people who are in smaller places where there might be 10 main restaurants, people who are truly local to those places aren't going to look online to find a great restaurant, because they've been going to the same great restaurant for 10 years. Which is why, if you're doing local online advertising for whatever you're doing, you might be missing these people that really aren't doing local searches. Not that they're not true locals, but they're such true locals that they're not seeking information about their own city online. And so that's really also the kind of people that you can find in real world, offline engagements, because they're still very active in their cities. They're just not searching for their they're not searching for
They're not looking, exactly.
yeah,
So many local
they already
folks
know
aren't
their
even
city.
using Yelp to find, like,
Right.
it's date night for me and my wife tonight. We're not going to Yelp to find a new place to go for dinner. it's just not where we start. A great question came through. It was, and I'm learning this system here. How do you budget in sponsorships into your marketing campaigns? Do you search for opportunities and ask the client if they'd like to sponsor, or do you build it into your monthly fees? Now, this is probably from an agency. I'll tell you what we do, and then we do. So we either sell. We understand what the client's trying to accomplish, and then find those opportunities and sell just the opportunities. We also then sell the opportunity plus itself is something we record, or if there's a cost, we record it. Sometimes, I mean, obviously, if it's a blogger or you're doing some other form of local engagement, be it a some kind of PR or whatever, you're not going to necessarily have an incurred cost or a direct cost. But if there is a cost, we record that, and then clients can make their decision beyond that. But typically, we're charging a fee for our time and our effort, and then if there's an added sponsorship cost, then that's the client covers that, and then they can make their choice based on what costs look like. But even getting cost data is just it just is time consuming, and but anyhow, I hope I've answered that specific question. Let's see, I'm looking to see if we got any more. Do they work in the UK? I think the question is,
yeah.
Can these types of efforts work in the UK? We believe so, but don't know. We haven't worked in the UK yet, so I think so. I'm looking for any more questions here.
And I would say it seems like it's like the only thing I guess we don't know is the local culture of cities in the UK. Being both Americans, we know how American cities work, and so I'm sure a version of what we're talking about works in the UK. But as far as like, is there in the US, I know like every city has 5Ks all the time. Are 5Ks super popular in the United Kingdom? I'm not sure. But there
maybe they have 5 miles
there. Yeah, probably they do. But yeah, like what kinds of local organizations are more prevalent in different countries? That will probably vary from country to country, just like it varies from city to city. So it certainly is possible. It would take being more intimate with that country to know where to search.
Folks, if you have more questions, we would love to hear from you, either an email or Twitter. To the best of my ability, I've gone through and found the questions that were submitted directly through the GoToWebinar interface. We love local. We love it. It's absolutely just a massive push for us. Citation Labs is still going to do link building, obviously, but standard location agnostic link building. But we're just we love local engagement. We love understanding a city and then helping clients engage with real local people at the local level, and so we would love to hear your questions if you have them. It's a big push for us, and we're just really excited about this. What really the opportunity is, and it's again, it hasn't really been fulfilled yet. Like the kind of real establishing at some sort of scale, some reasonable scale, real local connections hasn't really been done yet. And so this is it's your time, folks. Go out there and do it. You can. I believe that the opportunity is real for a national brand, or a soon-to-be national brand, to really start at that grassroots level and build up, as opposed to starting at the top and building down. I feel like there's a real opportunity there. Anyhow, email us with questions. Hit us on Twitter. We love this topic. We love this work. So let us know what questions you have. As you proceed, let us know what findings you have. This is, as far as we know, a relatively new kind of discipline or approach. Obviously, nothing that we're talking about is new, right? Like PR, advertising, sponsorships. Nothing of this is new, but really kind of targeting the hyper local with it and trying to do this at in a systematic way is fairly new. If you have questions or you're trying it out yourself, let us know. We want to find more folks like us. we want to find you out there so we can share what we've learned and hear what you've learned as well. So we're excited about this this direction. Folks, thank you. Megan, anything to...
I think we're good. Thank you everyone for listening, and if you're live or if you're listening on YouTube, and like I said, please ask us more questions, and we're excited to continue to share our learnings as we grow in this area. So yeah, thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Megan. See you guys. Thanks so much.
Bye.